Hello, sinners, and hail Sappho. It's your hostess with the mostest, Narcissa Deville. And if you're new here, hi, hello, how are you? We've been expecting you. I make weekly videos. I can't say that I make them necessarily about Good Omens anymore. I do have some content, but I'm actually starting to I almost said transition, which is so funny for me. I'm actually starting to I have some evolutions coming that I am very excited to announce to you. I'm going to be talking about that later. I'm not going to, mention anything right now, but just don't you worry. I have some other things that I'm planning in future. So I'm very excited about that. It'll still be fandom related, just kind of an evolution of my brand, if you will. But for right now, I do want to talk about this, and I'm very, very excited about this. So this is my official ranking of all of the episodes so far. Now, this is just based on my opinion. This is not going to be based on, anything other than just speculation, vibes, my thoughts. I'm not basing this on how other people rated it online. I'm not basing it on anything other than just my own thoughts and opinions. And I've given this a lot of thought. I actually spent quite a few weeks when I originally came up with this idea, just like evaluating what I felt about the episodes, rewatching them, reformulating my opinions. Like I really did put in thought for me of what, why I feel like each episode ranks where it ranks. Now, obviously, at this point, we have 12 episodes total. So the ranking is going to be from 12th, which is to me the least successful episode, to number one, which is the most successful episode. Now, keep in mind that in my personal opinion, I don't think there's necessarily any episode that is terrible. I don't think there's any episode that is completely just awful. But in order to rank these, from worst to best, you have to choose someone. And so a lot of these that are maybe not my favorites are going to be based on what someone, maybe a minor thing, not a major issue. Whereas some of the, best episodes are also going to be based on certain scenes rather than the overall episode. And, you'll see once I get to my number one slot, I am going to explain all of these and my reasoning, but I'm just saying right now, this is kind of it is based on my own opinion. So the least effective episode, or at least my least favorite episode, and this might be okay, this might be an unpopular number 12 spot. So for me, number 12, season 1, episode 1 is by far my least favorite. There's a lot of reasons why I think it's good. It tells the story, it introduces it in a way that I think is enjoyable. So it isn't that it's a terrible episode, like I said, but it just, I don't know, something about it just, looking back on it, it's not my favorite of the episodes. Moments to enjoy, but it's just considering everything else that we have, I just feel like it's not the best one. You know what I mean? And as I've said, there's a lot of things that happen. I think we talked about this when we first did the review of the episode. There's a lot that happens in the episode. It's kind of a jam-packed episode. And again, I feel like it tells the story just fine. I feel like it's not an issue of flow, even though I do feel like, 12-ish years happen in the span of that, hour-ish long episode. So it's not really necessarily that. It's just the fact that it's not my favorite. I don't know what to tell you. Number 11, what am I trying to do too? Number 11, and that is going to be season 1, episode 4. So yes, I know it's 2 season 1s in a row. I'm sorry, I can't help it. So this is the episode where Crowley and Aziraphale have one of their big breakups. It's also the episode where Uriel refers to Crowley as Aziraphale's boyfriend in the dark sunglasses. And that's obviously a scene that I enjoy, but overall, a lot of my issues with some of these episodes is that they're not memorable to me, or certain things I'm it's not standing out. It's not the top of my list as the most interesting. I will say I do enjoy when Aziraphale gets discorporated and says, "Oh fuck," I think that's very cute. There's certain things I think that are enjoyable-ish about this episode, but just overall, it's just not my favorite. Again, none of these are necessarily episodes that I think are terrible. None of these are episodes that I think are you know, throw them in a fire. It's just it's not my favorite. And this is one of the ones it's just not my favorite. So this number 10, I think we all would have seen coming. And maybe you would have thought it'd be number 12. And to be honest with you, I've re-evaluated this episode a couple of different times, and that is season 2, episode 4, which is of course the zombies episode. Now, that alone really ranks that down far on this list for me. That alone is almost enough to tank it. The whole entire part with the zombies, and that is like 99% of the episode, is set in 1941. And that's rough. I'm going to be honest. That tanks this for me so far down this list because it's just bad. I don't know what it is because it seems like episode 4 of season 1 is really low and then episode 4 of season 2 is really low. I almost would be willing to say that this one is worse than the season 1 episode 4. And again, I'm not opposed to like reordering this. I could easily call this number 11, like switch this with the last one. But my issues with this ultimately are kind of the obvious. I think what does set it a little bit better is there are enjoyable moments in the 1941 scene. I think there are parts that are more successful and more memorable necessarily than season 1's episode 4 that I previously listed as number 11. But I do think, to be honest with you, the whole zombie aspect and the fact that that took up such a large portion of the episode really tanks this for me. And I don't think I'm alone in thinking that that really doesn't add anything. I know people have tried to argue with me that like, oh, well, you're American, you don't understand that those actors are really big in like British comedy. Listen, I watch British comedy all the time. Like Ab Fab is one of my favorite shows. Keeping Up Appearances, Are You Being Served? I grew up on all those, like Vicar of Dibley. Like I love those shows. So don't talk to me about British comedy. I watch it regularly. The issue is not with that. The issue is with the characters themselves. It really doesn't matter how good the actors are, how funny they are, or how great it is that it's like this, you know, uh, send up to these actors or whatever. The characters themselves are the issue, and it's has nothing to do with just the zombie aspect. It has to do with other parts of them that I don't want to talk about, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I want to make that clear that I do respect and appreciate that these are comedy actors. I'm not dogging the actors by saying that I don't like the character, and I just think that's important to say. And I also don't know that the argument that, like, oh, they're big in comedy, so it's okay. I don't think that's the argument that it seems to be. And I understand, like I said, Neil Gaiman had his reasons for doing this. He has every right to add that into his story. I just personally did not enjoy it. I do not feel like it adds anything. And I think, I mean, ultimately, I feel like it detracts from the story overall to me. So that's just my 2 cents. I'm going to drop this for now, but I just want to say that I do feel like this episode is much lower to me or for me because of that aspect. I don't think it adds anything. I don't think it's successful at all. And I think that the episode would have been just fine without these characters. So number 9 is gonna have to be season 1, episode 5. Now, this is, a lot of these get pretty difficult. I think it's once I get towards the top 5, it becomes really difficult because it's just like, you're splitting hairs. It almost feels like I can understand how the judges feel on Drag Race because there are some obvious glaring issues with the previous entry, but I feel like with some of these other ones, some of these other ones, there's not necessarily big glaring things that make me dislike them. It's just kind of like, was it memorable? Was it enjoyable? There's little moments that I think stick out to me more than others, and then some episodes it's kind of like meh. Now I will say the two of my favorite parts in this episode are the mention of Aziraphale calling himself the Southern Pansy. I think that's hilarious. Get it, girl. I also love the inclusion of um, the Discreet Gentlemen's Club in the 1880s. We've talked about that when I did the review of the episode. So those are all things that I enjoy. Those are all moments that I enjoy. And that's something that could like hike it up a little bit. But overall, number 8 is going to be season 2, episode 1. Now, there's a lot of things to enjoy about this episode. I do love the little bit of Angel Crowley. I think that's very cute. I think the interaction with him and Aziraphale in heaven is very cute. I think it's overall not a terrible opener to the season in general. The apology dance, I think, was a lot of fun. Crowley's kind of obvious jealousy over the fact that there's some mysterious naked man in Aziraphale's shop is really fun. And of course, I love everything to do with Nina and Maggie. But again, it's just there's other things that I enjoy more. Like what else can I say? Like there's just other episodes that I enjoy more that stick out to me more. Plus, I don't know. I do think the intro and the concept of like Gabriel not remembering who he is, and then like his whole redemption arc thing. I could do without that, and that's kind of the focus of like the first episode and the last episode more than anything. So that kind of does rank a little bit lower for me. But so number 7. Okay, this is going to be season 2, episode 2. So see, I really did rank this fairly, I think, because this is one of the lower ones on my list. It's not the worst by any means. This is, I've said many, many times, not my favorite episode. I do not enjoy the Job storyline, and that does take up a vast majority of this episode. And again, this is the one that I was saying, like, this is one of my friends' comfort episodes, and that's great for them. Um, you know, adore you. We're still besties. That's not going to change, but this just episode is just not for me. I will say what's interesting is I do kind of feel like I go through waves with that episode, right? Like the first couple times I watched it, I'm like, oh, I don't like this. Second couple of times I watched it, I'm like, you know what, this isn't so bad. And then the next times I watched it, I'm like, okay, no, I skip. It becomes it's like, what are the episodes that you're gonna skip for me? It's like, what are the episodes that I can skip? What are the episodes that I don't feel like I'm gonna miss anything if I don't rewatch these? You know, the top 5 are gonna be like the episodes that I'm looking forward to, especially the top 3. It's like these are the episodes that I'm gonna watch again and again and again, mostly, but we'll get to that. So episode number 6 is going to be season 1, episode 6, which is the finale of season 1. And I know it's maybe going to come as a surprise that this would be so low on my list. There are a lot of factors to this for me. Like, I feel like the reason I don't enjoy the season 1 finale as much as I enjoy other episodes is just because I feel like it's for what it was when we thought this was going to be the end of the entire series. There was not going to come anything after this. It's not a bad ending at all. By no stretch of the imagination do I think this is a terrible ending. It's great. I love the last, scene in which Crowley and Aziraphale are having dinner together at the Ritz. Everything that leads up to that, I could take or leave. I don't know why it starts in hell and then we have to rewind back to the beginning of the episode. That's really strange to me. It's not a terrible thing, but it's just like it's a nitpicky thing. I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. I do love the whole switch with Crowley and Aziraphale. I think that's fun. There's just, I don't know, little things. It's not my favorite of, and I will say I feel like in general the season 2 finale is less my favorite, but it's also higher on this list somehow because there's more things to enjoy about it. So yeah, it's number 5 is going to be season 2, episode 3. And this one is The Clue, featuring the mini-sode The Resurrectionist, isn't it? I think so. This episode is like higher on the list for me because in general, I love the scene with Crowley and Aziraphale at the pub. I love that Crowley has like a date night outfit, and I love that it's like a date night moment. I love seeing Aziraphale place his hand on Crowley's chest. It's very interesting that he does it as soon as this woman approaches them. It feels very like possessive in a way, and I kind of enjoy that. I don't know, just in general, I do like some of these scenes. I love Aziraphale turning the Bentley yellow. I love him saying it's pretty, that it matches Crowley's eyes. There's lots of things that I enjoy about this episode more than I think others. And we are, like I said, we're getting into the top 5. So this is where it really starts to be like some of my more favorite episodes in general. So number 4, this one's a little bit tricky because this particular episode has been all over this list at this point. And you will see why, because it is episode 6 of season 2, every day, uh the last episode that we've seen so far. And look, how do I talk about this episode? It ends on such a frustrating note. It's so deeply upsetting, and yet, and like everything about the last 15 is like deeply emotionally upsetting. I can't ever rewatch the episode without like wanting to cry, and yet I think it's high on this list because A, I do love the kiss, but B, I think the whole conversation that Aziraphale and Crowley have, and Crowley's monologue, and just how clearly this is such a love story, and I feel like this exemplifies it so well, and it's so tragically beautiful, and like you just want to see them together. So number 3 is going to be season 1, episode 2. And you know what? I can say pretty much definitively, this is almost exclusively for the paintball scene. I think the whole conversation is fun. I think anytime they get to be in the Bentley is enjoyable. I think them going to this whole paintball retreat experience is hilarious. But ultimately, Crowley slamming Aziraphale up against a wall for calling him nice is just, uh, that's all I need. I could watch that scene 100 times over just by itself. And for me, that is enough to rank this as high as it is. And I also love the dramatics of how Crowley and Aziraphale act after getting shot with a paintball. I love how Aziraphale is so pouty at the idea of having to get rid of the stain himself, but is perfectly happy to let Crowley do it, even though it's still using a miracle. There's just everything about this. There's just these, again, it's the paintball specific scene. Everything about it, I think, is just so funny. It's silly, the scene itself, but I enjoy it so much. I enjoy Crowley turning the guns into real guns. I enjoy the moment with Sister Mary Loquacious. Like, sorry to interrupt an intimate moment, gentlemen. Like all of it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's so much fun to me. You know what I mean? So the number 2 ranking, I think number 2 and number 1 are not going to be a surprise. I will say, however, that in my opinion, both number 2 and number 1, both of them could have been number 1 for me. Um, so just keep that in mind. And I kind of debated back and forth which one, but I've really, truly, I think number 1 is like a no brainer for me. But number 2 had to be season 2, episode 5, The Ball. Need I say more? Crowley and Aziraphale dancing together. The whole scene of Aziraphale getting the whole scene where Aziraphale is like getting everyone together to go to the ball, I think is really, really funny. And that's where the conversation happens between Nina and Crowley about Crowley clearly, loving Aziraphale, and oh, other people's love lives always look so simple. I love that scene. I love all of it. This episode for me, yes, there are jarring moments. I think cutting back to hell as much as they do for the whole scene with Shax is kind of like, okay, whatever. And the whole storming the bookshop, it sounds more ridiculous the more they talk about it. But like in general, I would say I love this episode. I love this scene. I love all of it. I don't know what to tell you. Like, so I think I speak for everyone when I say that the number 1 slot is probably the most obvious of all of these rankings. I think I've talked about that it's going to be number 1 um since the episode since we first reviewed the episode. I don't think there was any doubt in anyone's mind when I started this review that episode 3 of season 1 was going to be my number 1 spot. Do I have to explain myself with this? I think it's very self-explanatory at this point. There is just something about this episode that I like. And it's by no means perfect. I made my complaints clear when we did this season 1 review originally of this episode. I still think the crucifixion scene goes on way too long. I think in general, there are certain things that maybe didn't need to be added or certain things that could have been added. But overall, there's just something about this episode that speaks to me. I love the way they did the original 1941 scene. I love, you know, it's just so beautiful. It's so like romantic. I love the music. I love everything about this scene. The first 30 minutes to me make up for anything else in the rest of the episode that I maybe don't care about. I could just watch the first like cold open 30 minutes and then be done, and that's enough for me. And that's what makes this episode so good to me. And in case you were wondering, like, obviously, um, where would I rank the little COVID episode, the lockdown episode? Honestly, I don't know because that wasn't really a full episode. It was a 3-minute kind of thing. There's definitely things I enjoy about the lockdown episode. I think it definitely speaks to me and I remember it very well. Um, and it was a cute little moment, especially as like that was something we didn't know would ever um happen. I mean, I could probably put it like solidly in the middle at like number 6 and then just push everything else down. I think I'd be comfortable saying that. Yeah, so that was the ranking. I'm sure not everyone is going to agree with my ranking. I would love to hear your guys' ranking of these, what you guys think. Do you have episodes that you like more, episodes that you like less than kind of what I said here? I would love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, comment down below, subscribe to my channel. You can also become a member of my channel. We have 2 tiers. We have the Ineffable tier and the Our Side tier. The Ineffable tier, you get special little emotes once I go live. You do get on the Our Side tier early access, some behind the scenes content. You can also become a member of my Patreon. That's patreon.com/narcissistiville. Yeah, and until next time, stay devilish and see you next Tuesday.